Well, thank you so much for joining the Comic Binge today. I am your host, Paul Herman. I will be later joined by my other co-host, other co-partner, Chris Clow. But before I do that, I want to say please like the video, subscribe, all that jazz, because I hate saying it. Get it out of the way, because I don't like saying it. But either way, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited today to talk to everyone here. Got a great cast of characters to talk to about a comic book that I kind of forgot about in a sense, and we'll get more of that later. But the Rocketeer and kind of the legacy that this character kind of brings to everybody. So I'm excited to talk about it. We're going to talk about the movie a little bit. I want to save the movie talk crew for eventual movie episode where we do comics the movies eventually in like 20 years, but save it because I want to focus on the comics mainly. But the movie will be brought up by yours truly, myself. So don't rest assured you're going to get some movie talk a little bit. But anyway, I'll introduce everyone here. Again, I am your host, Paul Herman. And as soon as I fix this up, there we go. I am your host, Paul Herman. With me is Chris Clow. Hello, Chris. You can talk, Reverend.
Hello. How's it going?
All right. Thank you. Reverend Chris Clow. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
I'm good. Good. Life is weird, but good. We have the new guest here, new guest host, new friend of the show, Mr. Mike Templeton. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Hello,
guys.
Going well, man. Hey, tell us about your podcast and how much I feel bad for not having you on the show previously. Go ahead.
So those of you, my name is It's the Rocketeer on Twitter. However, I am primarily known as a certified Ninja Turtle expert. I host the weekly show, the Ninja Turtle Power Hour, and I also do the news segment on the Turtle Recall podcast. So I am blown away that Paul asked me to be talking about the Rocketeer, though, which is, like I said, my namesake. I love this.
Yeah. It's your namesake on Twitter, man. I knew that. I knew you've always been a big Rocketeer fan. I actually, for how many years we've talked on, about Spider-Man and Turtles and Star Wars, we haven't talked that. I mean, we talked some Rocketeer, but I don't remember us having like a real good, deep conversation about this character. I don't think ever.
I don't get to talk about him that much at all, actually, because most people don't know him beyond the movie. And it's and even then, a lot of people thought that this was an old comic from like the 30s because of the look of the comic or of the movie. And it's like, no, this is an 80s comic.
Yeah, which we'll get into all that. This is a fascinating comic. Which our last guest, definitely not least, my good buddy Adam. Hello, Adam.
Hey.
Hi. All right. I didn't do a good job setting you up, but I want everyone to know how much I appreciate Adam. Adam has done so much for helping edit videos and just being pretty much whenever I need him, he's always there. And I just want to say I appreciate like crazy, Adam. Like I've gotten to know you the last couple of years, and you've been awesome. You've become a good buddy, and it's like I'm so glad I've known you. So just know that. I just want you to know that right now. And I tee all that up because it was Adam's pitch for the Rocketeer.
Oh,
and
thank you, Adam.
I know. I was like, he goes, hey, what about an idea? What if we did a Rocketeer episode for a comic book masterpiece? I went, Adam gets it. Adam gets it, man. He gets. I love this about him. He gets it. So, Adam, I'm gonna tee it up for you. You pitched this to me, and I say pitched very lightly because you just told me, hey, we should do a show. Of course. I mean, Adam pretty much could say, let's do a comic on freaking Spidey super stories. I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it. I mean, Adam, he has, that's the kind of power Adam has in the comic binge. He's got a lot of pull on this show because he's pretty much you're part of the show, and you are. So tell me, what inspired you to do this show or this series for this episode today?
I was at San Diego Comic Fest when I texted you this, and they had a tribute panel to Dave Stevens because it's this year's actually the 40th anniversary of the comic. And IDW is celebrating with like a new artist edition, and they've got that new series, The Great Race, coming out. Little 5-issue limited thing, I think. They're on issue 3 now as of this recording.
I had no idea. I'm so out of the loop with Rocketeer.
And
who's writing it?
It's written and drawn by Stephen Mooney is his name, I believe.
Yeah, who did Half Past Danger. So if you haven't read Half Past Danger, this was right up his alley.
Okay. All right. I'm going to check it out. This sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was just really touched by the panel, and I had seen the movie, and I liked the movie, and the movie made me want to get into the comic, but I hadn't, and I got the comic, but I hadn't read it until for this show. Typical me.
Typical me too. The comic book helps me read everything pretty much.
That's why I'm like, that's why I like bug you about stuff. I'm trying to, get into and get involved, a little more.
Good.
More than I have been lately.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But yeah, I don't know. The panel was just so touching. Bill Stout, William Stout, who he does a lot of art. He's a great artist. He was like a good friend of Dave's, and just the stories he had and about him, it was touching and it was very emotional. And I mean, Dave just is a legend pretty much. And I just thought, hey, after hours at the con, I'm just thinking, hey, I think this is a comic book masterpiece episode.
Yeah, I don't disagree necessarily. And there's a lot to digest in this character, and I think in the story of the Rocketeer and kind of the legacy, and then kind of what they're doing now. We could go on. I could go on. This is a whole, like, almost not series, but almost a mini series, you could say, of just ideas of what you could kind of different directions, because it's very fascinating, this character and what's kind of happened, because it's very unique in a lot of different ways. So I guess we'll kind of just jump into it. Again, the movie will be brought up here. Evan, you can't. I don't think you can, prevent that from this conversation. But I guess I'll kind of jump around to everyone. Speaking of the comic specifically, and you can bring up the movie if you need to with this. But when did you read this comic book for the first time? I'm gonna go to YouTube for you first, Mike, because you're the biggest Rocketeer fan probably here. Again,
no, that's fine. Yeah.
But when did you first dive into the Rocketeer comic book?
So specifically for the comic, was in the I want to say the late 90s, around 95, 97. Was when I was really getting into comics at the time, with my friend, my best friend at the time, and he had taken me to a new comic book shop that he liked called Pegasus Comics in Whittier, California. They're not there anymore. But I was going through the dollar bin, and I found actually the last issue. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was the last issue of the Dave Stevens run, the Rocketeer Adventure magazine number 3, which kind of ends on a cliffhanger. And that's actually the last issue of the whole Rocketeer run, of the original Dave Stevens run. And so I still have that. It's in a long box somewhere, but that was where I first found the comic, and I was like, okay. And it actually wasn't until IDW started putting these out again, about 7-8 years ago, when they put the complete adventures out, and when they had done High Flying Adventures and the really cool, I can't think of the word right now, but when they do little vignettes, and it's each one is a different story, anthology. When they were doing all the anthology books, I fell in love with it. And then the 3 main miniseries right now, Rocketeer at War, Cargo of Doom, and Hollywood Horror, 2 of those by Mark Waid. I was like that. I really like the Rocketeer as kind of this neat, insert anywhere kind of character.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get into the other comics later. We'll get into those later. So interesting. So you got in. When did you buy and read the whole thing?
So it was easy for me to find when IDW started reprinting them about 7-8 years ago. Because ever since then, that was the only Rocketeer issue I had ever found, in any of my comic book stores that I used to go to. So it wasn't until the internet started getting bigger, and I kind of fell out of collecting comics for a while. And it wasn't until the early to 2010s where I really started getting back into comics. And then I was like, okay, like I want to try and find some of this stuff again. And then right around the corner, there were new Rocketeer books from IDW. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, the new Rocketeer books. We'll talk about those.
I know we'll talk about those, like, but for the specifically for the specific old stuff, like I said, like I was never able to find them, so like I had to make do with like reading like character bios I could find online, or like reading about Dave Stevens's, like, you know, everything about him.
Sure. Yeah, it's man, this is super. Again, this is super fascinating. So Chris, I'll go to you next, man. What's your take on, you know, Rocketeer? When did you first kind of dive into everything for this character?
Well, the first time I dove into anything with the character.
Excuse me, the comics specifically. Sorry,
the comics while I worked at a comic book store. Because I was there. I started working at a comic book store in 2007, so not long before the IDW reprints began being published. It's my understanding that one of the final things that Stevens did when it comes to approving the publication of the new compilation was that he selected Lauren Martin to do the coloring.
Yeah.
So I've never actually seen what the original pages looked like, but I mean, the current reprint that is now widely available digitally is beautiful. So that was really my first exposure to the original books. But I mean, my love of the character goes back to when I'm in, I don't know, like 3 years old, when I would watch the movie obsessively and try to rent it every day, and having my parents call the video store and them saying it's all checked out, and them telling me and me being bummed out, and then my mom bringing home a storybook with an audio cassette that would read the storybook to me as I thumbed through it, and reading along aloud with it, and literally watching the movie in my mind when I was like 4 years old, when I didn't have any other access to it because I'd seen it so many times and had just completely internalized every moment of it. So, I mean, my affinity for the character and his world was established by the movie. And I like Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo. And I mean, they were involved in like the 1990 Flash TV show. And Dave Stevens also did some design work for the costume that was built for that show by, why can't I think of his name? Really famous effects artist who built the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park and built Iron Man's costume.
You're thinking about what's his name?
Why can't I think of his name?
Stan Winston.
Stan Winston, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Legend, icon, even.
So, but I mean, getting back to the books, I mean, because I already had enough goodwill built in because of my really strong affinity for the movie, I was really anxious to see what the books look like, because before that reprint came out, they weren't accessible, as Mike alluded to, you know. So, having the chance to read everything straight, it's amazing to me how many specific differences there are, but spiritually is very recognizable.
We'll get to that. We'll get into that.
Chris, did you ever play the video games?
Yeah, so I actually had one of the MS-DOS games on my dad's work laptop. That was the only one that I had.
Don't mess around, Adam.
Where you actually did like the GB Racer race around, at like one of the first levels. So that was the first one that I played. And then it's funny because I went to the Museum of Flight in Seattle a few weeks ago, and GB's there.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I live by the Museum of Flight.
I gotta go to Seattle.
Yes, you do. You can hang out with me. I'll say what's up.
I would love to. I played the NES game and the Super Nintendo game, and the Super Nintendo has that GB race too.
Okay, yeah. I need to play that. I've never actually played the console games before.
They're not good.
Okay. I've got
very much tie-in games.
No, it's fine. I mean, I've got a whole podcast about tie-in games, so I've got a high tolerance.
All right.
So for me, I obviously, you know, the movie, I remember as a kid, I loved the look of the character. I knew he was being pushed heavily in the comic books in promotion, right? And one of the things that I remember I saw at a spinner rack, they had I'm not even sure it was a spinner rack, but this is in like early 90s though. When the movie was coming out, I saw a comic. I almost bought it, but it didn't seem right. It just seemed weird to me. There was always a weirdness with the Rocketeer in the comics because I knew he was a comic character, but I can never find the comics.
Mhm.
And it's still to this day on there. I wish I could ask the Stevens estate or whatever, what was the reason why they didn't have or push a Rocketeer series at the time. Like, it just seemed very weird to me.
I sort of have an answer for that. There's an interview. It was basically a passion project, from what I understand. He was just doing it when he had the time, and it wasn't paying his bills or anything. He had like other work that was paying more for that.
Well, of course, yeah.
Yeah. It was just it was a passion thing, and based on stuff that he liked growing up, and they kind of wanted him, I think, to make it a series, but it was sort of like, I do it when I feel like it, sort of a thing. And then in this interview I'm reading, it's in like one of the Tomorrow's publications.
Oh wait, Tomorrow has a Rocketeer dedicated issue.
Well, it's like let me. It's an artist thing. It's
okay.
It's online. It's from Comic Book Artist number 15 from 2001.
Okay.
It's a huge interview here. I've read like
amazing.
I was reading some of it before the show. But he talks. I'll send you the link. He talks about how basically when he kind of put the character away for a little, like when he sort of like, was on hiatus with it or whatever, the companies that he was working for were kind of doing rip-offs of it because it was apparently selling well. But he was kind of like, it was a, he did it when he felt like it was, time to do more of it, like when he was inspired to do more. So
I think one of the original jokes I had heard, and that kind of always stuck with me, is that he uses it as an excuse to draw Betty Page.
Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get into that.
Speaking of things he liked when he was a kid.
Yeah, evidently. One of the things that I guess for me, I didn't understand why, if he didn't want to do it, why didn't he just write it, or why didn't have other people do it for him? Because it feels like when the movie came out, it seems like a no-brainer to put something out there, like maybe find some people he trusts and like gave him like came up with the stories, but maybe have someone else write the script. Well, definitely someone else write the script. Again, we'll get into that in here in a quick second. Anyway, so the thing is, I was just perplexed because as a kid, let's be real. This costume is iconic.
Yeah.
It is about as perfect as you can get for
this is like a top 10.
I have that toy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, top 10 superhero.
Yeah.
This, if you want to know how the blueprint, how to create a perfect superhero costume, look no further than right here. This is as perfect as you can get. It's simple, it's evocative. And one thing that I've learned over the last 5 years of just, of getting more into designs, and again, not me designing because I can't draw worth shit. But one of the things I've kind of learned about why I'm attracted to certain designs more than others is George Lucas, actually. And George Lucas actually really brought up to Doug Chiang, who directed a lot of the prequel stuff. And Mike, you know who Doug Chiang is and everything, yeah. I'm assuming. For those who don't know, Doug Chiang did a lot of the pre-production stuff, designs for, not all of them, but he did a lot of, he was a head designer, I believe.
He's like the main guy, yeah.
The main guy for the first 2 prequels. He dropped out the third one, which is a shame, but which is funny enough is my favorite of the 3, but I love Doug Chiang. He's an amazing designer.
Yeah,
George really,
Fighter is still one of the best.
Yeah. He really put Doug through the ringer, I think George did, because he really made him think differently. And now Doug's in charge of all Star Wars design for a good reason. He's an incredible designer.
Yeah.
And I think anyone can complain about the stories of whatnot of all Disney Star Wars, but I don't think a lot of people are complaining about the designs, and it's for good reason. Doug Chiang talked about how that George was obsessed with the silhouettes of the characters, and that was important for Star Wars. And I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, like silhouettes are important for us to really grasp and get, like, it's just something about the silhouettes of the characters that draw you in. And the Rocketeer is that. And it's always driven me into the character, and I've always loved the costume. And I think the silhouette is a part of that with the helmet and it's just perfect. Shoulder, it's perfect.
It's
So I say all that.
Iconic. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Please continue. Go ahead.
It's so iconic that I went to the 20th anniversary screening of the movie out in Hollywood. Kevin Smith hosted it. Like the cast was there, Joe Johnson, and Joe was talking about how originally when Disney wanted to make the movie, they wanted to change the helmet and to make it more like a fishbowl design. And Dave was like, absolutely not. And they were like, yeah, like we're movie people, we know what we're doing. And Dave's like, give me a weekend. And he had a friend commission the helmet. Or he commissioned the helmet and then brought it to them and then was like, look, and put it on. And and they were like, okay.
Wow. I heard an anecdote I heard about that was, they wanted to redesign the helmet and they actually did.
Yeah.
And I think it was Dave who said, "Oh yeah, that's a good helmet, but it's not the Rocketeer."
Dude, I can't imagine. Yeah. So I say all that to like be all that because I wanted to read Rocketeer comics, but they weren't accessible. Even when the movie came out, they weren't around. It's so weird to me. I still to this day, I just don't understand it. Well, part of it I understand now after I've read it years later. So fast forward to when I'm buying lots of crap on in-stock trades and still am now, ironically enough. And I picked this up. I was like, oh, finally, the Rocketeer comics. I can't wait to read it. I bought it. And I have it right here. Well, let me go grab it here real quick. This right here. And I was so excited to read this. So we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into it deep here, everyone. Unless I didn't skip you, did I, Adam? About your first foray into Rocketeer?
I mean, it's really just like I saw the movie maybe 10-ish years ago, and I was like, "Oh, this is a comic character, right?" Like,
you didn't even know. You've only seen it recently, somewhat. Wow.
Yeah. It was maybe it might have been less than 10 years ago.
Wow.
But maybe 10. I don't know. But I was like, "Oh, I need to get the comic because this is a comic character." And I got the book and I basically just read it for this show. I've had the book for a long time.
Yeah. I don't even think I even finished reading it the first time. I vaguely remember I was almost finished with it. Kind of tells you what I think about it.
But Paul, like you were saying, the look of the character is just, it's great. And that's it draws you in. This is what I want to say about, like, because I like masks, and the thing is the helmet, it's a cool mask kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this kind of thing, like, oh, what's so attractive about the mask? And I'm thinking of like the 3 C's. It's cute, kinda. It's creepy, kinda.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
Yes. Andrew, he's so sweet. Thank you, Andrew. So I have
a funny story about that button, actually. That Rocket Smash button that Andrew just mentioned. But you don't want to talk about the movie yet, so.
Well, let's save it. We'll return to this the movie. I want to again. There's some things with the movie I want to talk about, but mainly when they pertain to the comic, because I'll start it off here and I'll give it to you guys here in a second. When I started off reading this book, I was very excited because I like the movie. I wanted to like the movie more than I did, but part of it was because it wasn't very action packed. The movie wasn't, right? But I liked the movie still because the character was awesome. And there's a good kind of old timey feel that I even liked as a kid, but I didn't love it as a kid. I liked it, didn't love it, but I love the design. I loved the design. And so when I bought the comics, I thought I was going to get more of what I wanted.
This is a very low key book.
Yeah,
that's very well said. So Dave Stevens, obviously,
it's very grounded.
Yeah, Dave Stevens drew it, obviously, and Dave Stevens obviously works in Hollywood. He's a guy. He's doing his thing, and he's an amazing, phenomenal artist designer. Let's be real. Dude's incredible. Reading this comic, the layouts are fantastic. He totally gets it. I mean, I'm glad I reread a bunch of Spirit comics last year by Will Eisner, because it definitely got me into the mode of, reading this stuff because his layouts, they are very much inspired by those old time Sunday comics, it's old, like very early, superhero comic books.
Very pulpy.
I say pulpy, but like pulp is all like prose mostly, right? I mean, so this is pulpy, right? That's pulpy.
Right.
Yeah.
But these layouts are more classic and akin to Will Eisner. I'm trying to find one in particular that it kind of screams Eisner more than anything. But stuff like this, it's very much old-timey comic book stuff inspired by the spirit and things like that. So I love the art. I gotta tell you, the stories, they aren't the greatest. Now but like what Adam, when you suggested this for comic book masterpiece, I wanted to say I consider this a masterpiece by the art and I think the impact of the character alone.
Sure.
I don't know if it stands the test of time for many reasons. Well, I'll get to you guys in a second. But we'll get to that in a moment. But Chris, I want to get your thoughts on this really quick. Reading the comic book, what's your take? I got a little more of a deep take, and I think I may have already told you what I thought years ago, but I'll save it for the very end. But what's your take on the comic after reading it, and loving the movie?
It was an unusual experience, just because there's a lot about both that rhyme, just in terms of like the kinds of story that they want to tell, and particularly the beats where it's about him getting a hold of this device. The particulars seem less important in the book about the creation of the rocket pack, at least at the beginning, and like some of the other details, like the fuel source is pretty different, and but it's a means to tell this kind of sweeping adventure tale that does, I think, a good job of doing exactly what it wants to do and feeling like it's descended from pulp comics and from Saturday morning serials that you would find in movie theaters in the 30s and 40s. The reality feels far more heightened. It's immediately clear to me why Joe Johnston was the right guy to direct this movie. I think he even proved it far more by the time you got to the first Avenger. All of his inclinations were there to adapt this material. But when it comes to the actual stories of the books themselves, I had fun with them. Like, I didn't think that it needed to clear. I don't hold the Rocketeer books to the standards of like I don't know, like
Dark Knight Returns, Year One,
like a modern Superman story, for instance. I mean, it's just like it wants to tell a kind of a passé kind of story, but it wants to do it in style, and it absolutely
that's a great point.
Pulls that off. I had fun with it. There were a few things that surprised me about some of the specific ways in which Cliff Secord was characterized.
Yes,
like
very different than in the movie.
Very different.
Not only just in how everybody speaks, like it's not just Cliff that talks a certain way. Well, Muggsy, what it's just like
nix that.
Yeah, exactly. We got a bugs out of here, PVO.
He said, he called people like Buswuga like 4 times in one issue.
Bourgeois.
Bourgeois.
This isn't a book that the word jalopy would be out of place in. It's very.
No. Look at that heap over there.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it's all descended from that kind of stuff. So that was a little bit jarring, just seeing like on top of the dialogue, the differences in Cliff's character specifically were surprising the first time that I read it. But as I've sat with it more, it might actually be kind of a natural adaptive progression, the way that they decided to characterize him in the book. Frankly, in the movie, he's probably more likable, but in the book, he seems more scared too. Like he's more frightened by this device that he's found, and I mean, he's trying to make a living, of course. That's like his key motivating factor, which doesn't place him too far away from Peter Parker at the beginning, right? But the fear, especially as things ratchet up in the over the course of the first full story, you can see it in the page on the screen right now. Like he's frightened, and instead it's about his bravery and overcoming that fear, not in pushing it aside. And I like
motivations are interesting, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But it sounds like you liked it, but it's a little jarring from the movie to the book, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely worth reading for the layouts alone and for the line work. But it's just fun. Everybody's going to have a different set of expectations, especially if they come from the adaptation into the original books.
Yeah.
But it all kind of adds up into a very rich tapestry that a character with, relatively limited comics appearances and only one adaptation should not have this kind of richness and complexity in sort of tracking between something like a movie and the comics. It's rather shocking.
Yeah. Mike, man, what's your, after reading this again, and I'm just curious, what is your general take on these comics?
So it's been years since I had read them. I remember reading that book I found, Adventure Magazine number 3, and not realizing that was the end of the original Dave Stevens run, and having no idea what was going on. Like, why is Cliff in New York? What is going on here? And it's specifically like subtitle like Cliff's New York Adventure. But reading the comics and then going back to it, and like Chris had said, like Cliff's kind of evolution of being like this super possessive jerk of Betty specifically, to kind of like his wishy-washy, like, I'm gonna let her go. I can't live without her. I have to go get her back. Like that journey for Cliff, I think works as it's spread out all over the issues. And like the book isn't necessarily so concerned with like where the rocket came from, like Chris said too. Like it's not important where it came from. It's just important that he has it and what he does with it.
Yeah. So do you like these comics? Do you think they're good, or like get me a little deeper into what your take is?
I get the idea, and like I get that it's like it was a passion project for Dave. And he kind of did it when he wanted to, which is why like there's such a huge gap between the original 5 issues and the last 3. It's like 7 years, I think.
Wow.
And yeah, because like the original series is like 19 something, and then
like
I think
81-ish.
81, and then New York Adventure is like years later when it gets released.
Wow.
And I guess like my take for it is like, read it for the layouts, read it for kind of like I say this about like Ninja Turtles too, specifically the Mirage run. Like, get into the series like with the movie, like that's the best entry point, and then like read this for that additional context to see where we've come from. Because I don't think if anyone wants to get into Ninja Turtles, they should read Mirage first. I think it's a bad idea, especially now. With this, like you kind of have to have that context of like you need additional context of where this character is like now.
That I agree with you with Rocketeer. With Mirage and Turtles, I don't know necessarily. I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah, it's a different concept, but it's the same kind of thing I say for both.
It depends on the person. I think if for a mainstream audience, sure, if whatever. But like, I think those Mirage comics are phenomenal still to even now. As let's watch the episode we did. But with Rocketeer, context is key. Complete of like what you're going into it. It definitely enhances the material. If I were to read this, I'd be like, I love this character. This art's phenomenal. Yeah, but I want to throw it to Adam before I go a little bit deeper on this. Adam, taking so many years to read it and knowing, and obviously this character's known. I mean, this character's a very almost a borderline, not a household name, but people know this character. He's somewhat well known in general. What's your take reading these comics now? Finally reading them after all these years.
Well, Well, like I definitely agree with Chris that I had a fun time reading it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I think we all, for the most part, had fun reading it.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know. It's just I think what I like about it is it's this is Dave Stevens took his influences, what he liked growing up, and he took all that and he thought of this character and he created a story that he wanted to tell, and here it is. And I mean, it's not the movie. They had to Disneyfy the movie a little because it was Disney. I mean, that's fine. Broader appeal. But I think the characters, there's a little, we get a lot with a little. I think the characters are interesting. I think that Cliff is an interesting character. He, like Chris said, there is some Peter Parker here. He actually,
absolutely.
I feel like he kind of looks like Peter Parker-ish. I don't know. It's interesting. You have these, pulp hero cameos, the like wink wink, the wink wink nudge nudge. That there's that great page with the second special guest where it just it's like, oh, this is who this guy is. Wink.
Yeah.
The way he does the panel there with the nose kind of peeking out of the panel is really clever. But I don't know. It's just a fun story. It's an old school thing through a 50-year later lens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just feels like it came from the era. From what I understand, he was obsessed with the whole 30s aesthetic. Apparently, his place, his house. You walked into his house and it looked like you were stepping into 1938. So I mean, I don't know. Like, I think it's fun. I think it's beautifully drawn. The layouts are great.
Great.
Just dynamic art, expressive art. I don't know. It's just it's fun and it's beautiful to look at. Story, I mean, it's light on story, but like I said, well, it does a lot with a little.
I agree with that.
And it's low key, it's grounded. It's kind of grand, but it's still very down to earth. Like, this is still just a guy who lucked into this device, and things like Chris said, or I think Chris said, they spiral from there. And I think it's admirable. It's like if you were to read like a late 30s, early 40s issue of Batman or Superman or something, but it's he's not Batman, he doesn't have superpowers, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of like simple thing,
right?
With maybe a little more decompression. I don't know. I mean, not a lot of decompression, but like I don't know. It's an old school thing with slightly a bit of a new school flavor.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike, man.
One of the things I like about it is it's also kind of a love letter to that era of Los Angeles.
Sure.
Because this is very much specifically set in Southern California. Like the Bulldog Cafe, it was a real landmark in LA. And Dave Stevens is from Linwood, which is not too far from downtown. So like he kind of grew up in this, and then like me watching the movie and reading the book, like it feels very Southern California, like, and me doing my research on that era too, just like it feels very evocative. And so you get that sense of like, this is a very different than like Batman who lives in Gotham City and Metropolis. Like this is my hometown hero, kind of.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, listen. When I read it back then, Chris, I don't remember if you remember me telling you this, but when I read it, this is before he played Deadpool. But I only heard Ryan Reynolds when I was reading this book at the time.
Okay.
And I honestly feel with the right charisma, that characterization that you get in this comic book could work. But that is a tough thing to pull off because
do you one better. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, please go ahead. No, go ahead.
Christian Slater.
Ooh.
That's
like
pretty damn good,
90s,
actually.
like Christian Slater or Prince of Thieves Christian Slater, or like Mr. Robot. Yeah, because
God damn, that's good.
That's a good pull. That's a good pull.
Man, sometimes Adam just he kicks his ass, man.
Like it's like if anything, animate it and have him do the voice.
Yeah, no, I think for that characterization, yes.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I think the movie did the right thing. I think honestly, if they need to reboot the character, I say reboot. They need to redo the character a little bit, and if they are going to go back and tell tales of that, they need to maybe go more of that flavor, because that's a much more likable character. The whole time I'm reading this book, I'm just thinking to myself, Cliff isn't. I mean, he's supposed to be dumb, but he's just too dumb. I'm sorry. Like, he's just too dumb. Like, I'm like, I can't get behind this guy who is in an amazing costume, and he's just the biggest moron ever. And he's dating like literally a supermodel. But he's not, you know what I mean? Like, he's being really stupid about it. It's like, what?
It's the weird possessiveness that like
exactly
that really drives, and it's so constant that like it gets uncomfortable.
I have to ask you guys this, and maybe I'm wrong. Was Dave Stevens ever married?
Dave Stevens, yes.
It doesn't seem like he just understood the opposite sex or dating very well, because the way Cliff is, it's weird. It's just weird. I mean, whatever, right? Listen, the comic itself is it a masterpiece? Yes. On all the things we talked about, the layouts, the art, the designs, the callbacks, all those are worth it, because it is a tour de force of art and design. 1000%. You're not going to find many comics drawn this well ever, in my opinion. Like, they are beautiful to look at. The dialogue isn't terrible, but the characterizations are pretty bad. And even for back then, I'm sorry. It's like the Cliff. I just think Cliff is a bad character in general. And I think the movie, this Cliff, yes, terrible character. The movie character, perfect. Like, you talked about Disneyfying it, Adam. I felt that they did the right thing. That was the right call. Now, the design, they were idiots. And this prints money. This is why the character even exists in the first place, and it stood the test of time because of how good it looks. I mean, I don't want to sit here and be like, "Oh, the sex stuff is really bad." I don't want to be like that, because it's a different time for many different reasons, of when it was written, of the time it takes place in, all that stuff, right?
I think the time it takes place in is kind of critical to his underdeveloped perspectives on women, you know? I mean,
and then like the very the strong opposition to Betty being such a provocative and like strong in herself woman, like, who wants to do these risque photo shoots and stuff, and Cliff is just like, "No, you're being taken advantage of." She's like, "No, I actually want to do this." Kind of thing, and that rubs against.
I don't ever take that. I don't think, but here's the thing though. Betty seems like she just seems kind of aloof. Like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna. She like that again. That's just how I interpret it. Like, she is not a good character. She's just not. She's terrible.
I feel like you're being pretty harsh on Cliff.
I am,
because it seems like
good.
I think one of the things that does work against the reading experience of this is the fact that it did have such an irregular schedule. And when you are published at such an irregular basis, that seems like it has a great, it can do a lot to undercut the potential progression that your character can go through and the journey that he can go through. If there was a more consistent runway here, no pun intended,
Nice one.
You wasted it.
To actually develop him further, I do see maybe some unrealized potential here, in the sense that he's starting from a position of overriding self-interest, and his only real goal is monetary gain. Like, when he sees the rocket pack for the first time, he just sees dollar signs. But he's kind of forced over the course of at least the first half of the story of the entire run to come to grips with the fact that oh no, there's this stuff happening, and I'm really the only one who can do anything about it.
He never really seems like he wants to be a hero.
Well, no, but I mean, I think that isn't,
and that's kind of the point, I guess. But
yeah, I feel like that could be kind of the point.
I don't think that's an invalid perspective for him to start with. I mean, if we were in a different universe and we were talking about the celebrated 35-year run of the Rocketeer, if the Rocketeer went on for like Savage Dragon length, then who knows how this could have turned out.
You pulled that one out of your ass. That was a good one. No, in a good way. It's a good. I love Savage.
Yeah. I'm not denigrating Savage. Savage Dragon is shockingly consistent, and it's one creator who's been pushing it forward the entire time.
Consistent. I'll say that too. It's consistent.
If the Rocketeer had the same kind of chance, I do feel like there are some hints that he is developing into someone who could grow to accept a larger responsibility. We didn't get that from the primary creator, but there is potential here that does seem unrealized.
Now, the reason why I think Betty's not a very good character is because she's like, well, I shouldn't have sent Cliff away, but I worry about him. I'm like, you don't seem like you like him, and you seem annoyed by him, but you're drawn to him. What? That doesn't make any sense.
Isn't that like every woman that Stanley?
No,
but also too, I think
he's not a bad boy. He's obnoxious. There's a difference.
Paul, when you said you heard Ryan Reynolds, were you thinking like modern Ryan Reynolds, or
like I'm thinking like before Green Lantern Ryan Reynolds,
So not quite Two Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place, but not quite like Deadpool.
Yeah, I would say before pre-Deadpool, but like right around Green Lantern, like not that not. I would say actually, you know what? Cliff Secord is Green Lantern in that DC movie. 1,000%. No, it's done. Done deal.
Cliff Secord is a better Hal Jordan.
Right. Let's not.
Yeah, no, that's it.
But one of the things that came across to me, just in the way that the characters are rendered, is that these are kids, basically, right? Like maybe early 20s.
I don't see that. I think they're like in their late 20s, early 30s.
I don't see that.
I'm a 40-year-old man. So I mean, those are kids to me still. But
actually,
he's beginning. Oh, sorry.
I think the beginning says that Cliff was born in 1918, so he's like
20 then.
Yeah, he's 20. Yeah. Oh, 1911.
1911. Okay.
So he's 27 then.
Okay, I missed that part.
Hell yeah!
He comes across like someone who just doesn't have a very good handle on how the world works.
Because he's not written
also
well.
Something that's kind of not really talked about is like this is in depression. Like Cliff's
fair enough.
Yeah, is very on point. It's not talked about a lot of the book, but like that is a huge driving factor for him.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I just listen. I'm being harsh on it. These are my biggest nitpicks, but it definitely makes me not enjoy the story or wanting to reread it because of those reasons. I think Betty is just terribly written. Like she's just a terrible written character. I'm sorry. She looks incredible for many different reasons, but I just feel that with your two main characters, Peewee's great, but because he's a callback, right? What throwback. But the thing is with Cliff, he's not a likable character. The relationship doesn't make sense to me. It's like that's why I said, was he married? Because if this is what he thinks what a relationship is like, or is somewhat that's like not an abusive relationship. That's a what do you want to call it? A toxic relationship. It's not abusive, but it's toxic in a sense. I guess you could say toxic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. According to the wiki, he was only married for 6 months. So to his longtime girlfriend, who they were still friends with afterward.
Like I said,
they were married in 1980. So it was
like I said, there's some, I could sense some just not, yeah. I don't want to I don't know the guy, but I could sense there's an unhealthy maybe idea of what women are potentially. Just reading through the tea leaves and through the lines. It's just weird and whatever. But I still liked it. I will say I thought Cliff Secord was better in the pulp callback comics where he's taking on Lothar or whatever his name is. Luger.
Yeah.
Lothar,
yeah.
Yeah, Lothar. When he's taking on Lothar in the in the whole the circus thing was little out of nowhere. But that being,
it is kind of. Yeah.
So that's funny. Is like I think that's the stronger point of the book than the first 5 issues.
I agree.
I think Cliff's New York Adventure is like way better.
No, it's way better.
Because that's like, well, it's probably because maybe he had some time, that big gap. It's like, well, I have some time and I got the whole origin out of the way. So now we can get into the nitty gritty here and do like a pulp adventure,
Yeah, no, that's fair. Now, I want to talk about, because I loved all the shadow and I love all that stuff. Mandrake, I mean, that was great. Like that stuff is great. I just, it sucks because I do think this art is incredible. I think this is definitely a comic book masterpiece. I definitely think that. I say all that be very critical because it makes me I want to love this, but I don't quite love it. I like it a lot because of the art and the design. It's incredible. I want to, and this is, I know Dave Stevens is known for drawing Betty Page a certain way because obviously Betty Page is Betty Page. She's gorgeous. And this stuff, layouts like this are just chef's kiss, man. This is beautiful. Like this is art right here.
So
this is
what makes. I reread this digitally, and I was like, I have to screenshot this. Like it's just such a good page. Like no pun intended there.
No, right. That's good. You wasted it, but not as good as Reverends though. Sorry, Chris. That's still the worst one in the way that we should have used it. Anyway, I just want to say that this, to me, again, is a great example of why this is a comic book masterpiece, because this shows you how good the medium is and can be done when the right talent is doing it. And there's lots of right talent out there, but Dave Stevens is one of a kind. Obviously, he transcends the medium because he worked in Hollywood and designs, and dude is just a brilliant man when it comes to design and art. And I just want to say that this is a great example of what the medium can be pushed to, and also what kind of should show modern artists and writers, not characterization wise, but writers and artists, what you can do still with the medium, and don't just rest on doing little, 4 or 5 panels a page, but give us something like stuff like this more that really flesh out the characters. That's not just, their traditional thing, because we're reading back these comic books. One thing, guys, I'm curious, I want to hit all your opinions on this. But the medium itself, the medium right now is very heavy focused on, and again, I don't think it's a bad thing, but reliance on less is more, like less panels and everything. One thing, going back to the old comic books and, reading what the old writers and artists did, they said, and I quote, that they thought that more panels on a page meant that more people thought they were getting more bang for their buck.
Right.
Now there is a give and a take with that. But this, I thought Dave Stevens is, if you want to, again, this is my opinion. Now I don't claim to be an expert. I just claim to love comic books. I love comic books a lot. And in my opinion, I feel Dave Stevens puts on a clinic on these issues and shows you what you can do with a few panels, and how good you can do it, and how great you can be as an artist when you do. Because you can be a brilliant artist and still get your point across and make great looking pictures, and still, he probably put a lot of time into this, so maybe I shouldn't go that far. But you know what I'm saying? He puts a lot of panels, and he puts a lot of little things here in these comic books to give you this. And to me, this is what's missing in comics today, is stuff like this. Give us panels showing us what's going on. Don't rely on just big panels for cinematic feel. Yes, use that sparingly in your back pocket when you want to make an impact, but we want to tell a story. You got to do more sometimes, and give us more panels showing us a little bit more. And writers and artists today, the good ones, they give it to us for the most part, not all the time, but a lot of the kind of casual, I think okay ones, they're not doing it. And I feel that comic book writers and artists, in my opinion, need to go back to the old ways, giving us more panels on a page. Because honestly, people joke about reading a new comic in like 5 minutes, and that's the thing. It took me a while to read this. This is not a fast read. There's a lot of information. Now, is it filler in some ways? You could argue that. but I don't think so. And I'm curious what you all think. Chris, what's your take on this? I'm curious what your I threw a lot at everyone, but Chris is always prepared for my hot takes. But I'm curious what you think about this in the current medium compared to what he's doing, calling back to these old comic books like The Spirit, where he put a lot of panels on a page and give us a lot of story. What's your take on that?
I mean, I can see in terms of like modern books, there are instances where I feel like sometimes they pack too much in, but instead of visual information, like Stevens is packing into this, yeah, the word balloons can be like
that takes you out of it sometimes.
The first time I read Kevin Smith's Green Arrow, I was shocked at the size of the word balloons. They were huge. There was one that took up, I swear, like a quarter of a page, and I was like, well, it's Kevin Smith. He's a verbose guy. Probably not going to see that very much. But I'm surprised relatively recently it's kind of been moving in that direction. With this book, so much visual information is packed into each page, but the layouts are so clear that it feels very, very kinetic. It feels appropriate to the speed and adventure that you associate with a character named the Rocketeer, and with his primary, mode of transportation. It feels like the amount of information that you get. He needed, I feel like, and I'm just guessing here because I haven't honestly exposed myself to every single bit of his own perspective that he shared over the course of his life. But because the publication schedule was so irregular, he wanted each chapter to pack a punch in terms of story. And it feels like each one does. So I kind of feel like there's quite a bit of value here in terms of the story that you get. And like digitally, I bought the collection recently for $6, I think. That's a lot. That's a lot of. If you want to do like panels per dollar, you're getting
like,
quite a.
It's like 120 pages for $6.
Yeah. Not bad.
That's a steal, man. This is definitely worth picking up digitally for $6, 1,000%.
Yeah. Like if you can, if you see it at that price, like it's a no-brainer. Just jump on it, and you'll have 120 pinup worthy pages. No pun intended there either. Even though that's kind of how it works out. But no, I mean, in terms of like the disconnect between the way that these books are laid out and more modern books, it does seem like there are exceptions to every rule, I think, but it does seem like instead of packing in a lot of verbosity, it packs in a lot of really great artwork.
Yeah.
And
so
can't argue with the smoothness of the layouts.
Mike, man, what's your take on that? We're gonna wrap up here after we're done with this. So go ahead.
So for me, it gives me a lot of feel of like Bill Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes, and how he kind of re-revolutionized the Sunday funnies. So Dave's layouts here, like especially some of the pages that you've shown, like just the angle of Cliff on the left right there, and then the takeoff, like Dave worked with, he just knew how to set these scenes. And it's like the whole fall all the way down. Like it's going back and reading these, like, yeah, like you don't see a whole lot of this kind of visual storytelling in modern comics, because like everything has to be so grand. Like I'm reading a lot of X-Men right now, like of the new stuff. I like it. I like it, but like switching gears and coming to this, I'm just like, oh dang.
Because
like
this is a comic book.
This is a comic book.
Yeah, that's a problem. Is that, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but comics are not movies, and movies aren't comics, but they definitely can borrow from each other. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they can't, but the problem is people and artists want to do those grand, like those 2 pages. Again, there's a place for those things, but like you said, this is a comic book. This is 7 freaking panels, man.
Yeah.
Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8. No, is it 7? Okay. Dude, yeah, 7. But like, look at my math astounds me. Someone on Twitter said, "For all things you say, how you make it through the day astounds me." And I'm like, "You're not the only one." So yeah, me too. But the thing is, with this is exactly what's missing in comic books. because it's like visually interesting, and it's like it's information, and it's what we need to know, and it's good, it's entertaining, and yes, you have to kind of fluff things up a little bit, but I honestly, in my opinion, I'd rather fluff it up a little bit than feel I read like a meaty thing than reading like something I read in like 5-8 minutes. I'd rather read this for 15-20 minutes and actually feel like, oh man, I actually read something, instead of like, oh yeah, I breezed through it. Now I think there's a beauty to, I think there's an artistic take on both those things.
Yeah.
But this is a great example, I think, of how the medium is being missed in modern comics. And X-Men is a great example, especially Hickman at least gives us this, but it's not interesting. It's all dialogue. But I mean, I like Hickman.
I've tried to start Hoxpox so many times, and exactly. and I haven't really pushed through, so I just kind of went to Marauders, and I'm having a good time over there. But like like I said, going back to this, and just like there's a panel that's always stuck with me, and it going back to that first issue that I ever picked up, where Tina, like one of the sideshow characters from Cliff's time at the circus, when they find out, spoiler, she's in love with Cliff, Lothar's in love with her, Cliff blows her off, she dies, taking Cliff's place in a magic trick. And then like that panel of Lothar holding her like her little dead body, like with the skull mask on, I'm like, that's stuck with me for years, because it's such a beautiful page.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you can have those things and have those meaty moments and make them worthwhile. The little panels, they build up to not like literally all the time. Yeah, they don't always add up to the big moments necessarily on the next page, but it prepares the reader because they don't expect it. When you give readers 4 page, the most you do is 5 panels a page. Which again, I'm not hating on 5 panels, but it's just when it consistently is no more than 5 panels, it just gets it's like, you better be giving me some really interesting things in there, because it's gonna fly, man. And if you're not giving a lot of narration, it's just, I don't know. I digress. Really, we'll get your take here on this, Adam, and then we'll wrap up.
I pretty much agree with all you guys. I think that this story, it strikes a very good balance of, panels and exposition and dialogue and, all that. It's like you said, Paul, it's dynamic. And a lot of the times you have this dynamism in the panel layouts, and it packs a punch when it comes to these big moments, these big reveals. I think it's a good teaching tool.
Yeah,
to be learned from.
Yeah, and listen, like, there are great artists out there. There's great new comics that are doing this stuff, but I think overall, the idea of we got to remember what a comic book is. It's sequential art. And, you really got to go back to the ideas of back in the day. People want to read something that's not going to, be 2 seconds. I mean, and dynamics is definitely being lost a little bit in comic books, in my opinion. Overall, even the great ones, I think they're just not as dynamic as they could be. But that's a problem, I think, in a lot of art, to be honest. I think of music as another one. Dynamics in music, it feels with production levels and things like that. Like, it's, everything has got to be, and you're a music person, Adam, so you kind of get what I'm saying. But like, when you are doing digital and you're doing all this mastering, it's just, it's hard to get dynamics. And that's why analog is so good, because you really keep a lot of those dynamics and that are missing in music. And I think comics is kind of, I always compare music to comic books, because there is a similarity of rhythm with it. And obviously movies does too, but movies do as well, I think, in a way, but more even than prose, I think more than other mediums or just paintings or things like that. Comic books and movies, because they're moving, shares that similarity with music. But with comics and music, there's something about I go back to the pop song. The pop song is 3 minutes long, 2.5, 3 minutes long. The comic book is about 22 pages long. There's a very similar idea of dynamics and things like that, and how you could, different things bring different people in. And it's just interesting because I think that's being lost now, dynamics in general of those two mediums. And the good ones, I think the great ones, sometimes people don't care about dynamics, but it's so crucial, I think, for the medium to stay alive and fresh and to keep itself, whole, in my opinion. You need to get those and keep those dynamics. And I feel like comics right now, because they're competing with film and they're trying to show you what they'll turn into eventually now, I think it's being lost in what the medium is in general of sequential art and telling a story through pictures instead of, how can I sell a Netflix series? Well, let me just do 3 panels and, you know what I mean? Like, I don't begrudge people for doing that, but I feel like we're losing a little bit of the love and I think the care that the medium has. So just my little soapbox. And I think Dave Stevens does a phenomenal job of showing you the power of the medium. I don't love his characterizations necessarily, but I think he shows the power of the medium overall because it's a beautiful, beautiful medium. That's why I have a whole channel dedicated to how much I love the medium. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. Wrapping up here.
Okay, so since we're wrapping up, I want to get that story out about the button that Andrew brought up earlier.
All right, really quick.
Okay, so at the 20th anniversary, they had they like props from the movie, like some of the original stuff. And a friend of mine worked at Disney at the time, and he was like, "Oh, they asked me to wear the costume from the film. Like he had like some of his own parts, but they let him wear the jetpack." And so he was like taking pictures with everybody, and I walk up to him, I go to shake his hand, like all happy and everything. I broke the button off the jetpack, off of the hand thing. It just popped right off, flew across the room.
You'll never work
again. I ran away so fast, but I was so embarrassed. Yeah, that's just my funny story about the button.
That sucks, dude. That sucks. Well, look at then later it goes, oh no. So yeah. Well, guys, we're wrapping up here. Thanks for everyone who watched and liked the video and subscribed. Watch all the way to the end because apparently that makes your algorithm go farther. I don't know what this crap does anymore. But thank you for everyone who's come on. Mike, man, we're gonna get you on soon again for do some turtle stuff and some other stuff too. Maybe we'll do an next.
Hey, thank you for having me on for this, man.
Like, for sure, man. This
is an honor. I get to talk about the Rocketeer that often.
Well, yeah, I mean, we appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on. Where can people find your stuff at? Pimp your stuff out. You can find me on Twitter at It's the Rocketeer. That's ITS the Rocketeer. But my weekly show is the Ninja Turtle Power Hour, Ninja Turtle PH on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can get it wherever you find podcasts. We also upload directly to Facebook now, so you can just listen in the app. And then I do the news weekly on Turtle Recall here on YouTube. Nice, man. I didn't know you were actually on like multiple turtle podcasts. So
I actually just started Turtle Recall. He asked me, Jason over there. It's a show he does with his wife, but she didn't want to do the news content, so he was like, "Come on down." I was like, "All right, let's do it."
All right. Well, I'll check that out. And I've been meaning to check your Turtles podcast out. So, which I know you invited me on to do one of those. Whatever. We'll get some. We'll get some.
We're almost done with the image run of the Turtles, Volume 3.
Okay.
And then we're gonna start Volume 4. Probably after the current big arc that's going on in IDW soon, the Armageddon game. We're going to be starting up that run pretty soon.
Cool. Right on, man. Well, we'll talk more about it. And we'll get you on our show too to talk some turtles. Adam, tell us, where can we find you?
At Enchilada Legs on Twitter and Spidey Dude Experience on the Spidey Dude Radio Network on YouTube, etc. We just did last week our latest episode. Listen to that. Talking about the Zeb Wells Ramita Jr. run, the latest 2 issues, and it was a good episode. So yeah, check it out.
It was really good. We were firing all cylinders that day, even when I was driving.
Yeah, that's why, because you were driving. You were literally
driving. I was driving us.
Those cylinders were going.
Yeah, we were. And thank you for coming up with this idea. Obviously, you can come up with any show idea, and I'll probably do it because you're my boy. So, yeah, holler at me, Adam. Keep giving me ideas. I need them. I weekly content. It's not always easy. So, Chris, man, my best buddy, what are you doing?
We actually just released a 3-pack of episodes of Discovery Debrief where we broke down the most recent 3 episodes of that show, where you went from a terrifying like space submarine battle in one to a really funny comedy body swap in the next one to a heart-wrenching and really like poignant kind of tale in the most recent episode. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is phenomenal. So check out our discussions about it in Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast.
It's the best. It's the best show on TV now.
I agree with you. Yeah,
it's fantastic. It might be better than The Sopranos.
It might be.
It might be better than Breaking Bad.
It very well could be. I mean, imagine this. It's a classic character played by a new actor.
Thank God, man.
Who'd have thought that was possible?
Well, Kathleen Kennedy is possible, obviously.
Lucasfilm doesn't seem to think it's possible, but
apparently,
thankfully, that's why Star Trek exists.
But Strange New Worlds is like the first Trek that I've really watched since Voyager, so I'm like, this is choice. Like, I'm loving it.
The other ones, like the other ones have their strengths, but in terms of like hitting the classic button and like combining TOS with modern sensibilities, this one is just hitting it out of the park.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, thank you for the heads up on this, by the way. Well, I want to make sure.
Yeah, it is. You're right, Andrew.
It's incredible. Best show ever. It's better than Sopranos.
Why are people surprised? He's saying actually. Why are people surprised? It's fantastic.
We need to talk about this. Anyway, all right. You follow me on Twitter at Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P-Thug. Also follow Comic Binge on all the multiple things you can do stuff on, like Twitter and obviously Instagram, and just type the Comic Binge. You'll see the logo. Follow us. We're doing all kinds of stuff. And as far as Space Demons update, Antonio, crazy life. You know, he's hopefully getting part 2. He told me tonight he's working on it tonight. So that'll hopefully be done here in the next couple months. And then we'll work on the next big project. And then I'm hoping to start another comic book project at some point. I'm almost done with issue 2. I'm not ready to talk about it because I want to get actually stuff done with it that's actually further along than what it is now. But I'm almost done with just script for issue 2 of the new comic project idea. So most of these guys know what it is already. But super excited. But you know what? I'm not in here. I'm not the hare. Tortoise wins the race every time, as my dad would say. That's a funny story. I'll tell about that sometime. But anyway, yeah, comic book updates. Eventually, to be real, I want to be putting content out somewhat all the time for comic books, and the Comic Binge needs to grow more for me to do that. Not just for me, but for other people. I want to promote other people's work too, and do some kind of anthology stuff. But I need to get the show bigger, so people can support the show. And so I basically will take the support into making comic books. So that's my goal. And I'll talk about it more eventually, I think, as we go on and just try to promote that. Because I think the more we promote, again, I'm not in this to make money. I'm in this to promote the medium. So I want to get money to promote the medium. So promote people and to promote people making the medium. So comic books. Anyway, so yes, very excited. I'll continue to push this more as we go on. But thank you everyone for joining us. And Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.
All right, we will next week. Got a big, exciting stuff next week. Dark Choco's gonna do some Thor comics. I'm not even sure what it is yet, but we'll find out. All right, talk to you guys.